Welcome to the Libertarian Institute, Odyssey, and YouTube channel. I'm joined today in our roundtable with executive editor Sheldon Richman. Sheldon, first story on Reason Magazine. What do we have?
This is an article by J.D. Tuccille in Reason called "With Jordan Peterson, Occupational Licensing Becomes a Way to Censor." Well, you don't have to be a fan of Jordan Peterson. I like some of what he says, but not a lot of what he says. To be appalled by what's happening with him. He's of course, he is retired from teaching because he got fed up with academia, but he is a clinical psychologist. In other words, he has clients or patients or whatever for psychotherapy, counseling, and he's now been ordered by the Ontario College of Psychologists to submit to a, quote, prescribed specific continuing education or remedial program, close quote, sounds a little like re-education camp, because of tweets Peterson has posted and op-eds that has offended other people. And they don't like his opinion on that there's no climate catastrophe coming. He did a very good interview with Alex Epstein. And also, he doesn't think men can turn into women and women can turn into men. He just doesn't buy that. And he takes some other, what we used to think of as politically incorrect position. So what his career as a clinical psychologist can be in jeopardy if he decides, as we know what how Peterson reacts to commands that he attend a course or something. He's probably going to say no. So the question is, what then happens? Now, you may think, well, that's Canada. They don't have the First Amendment. But Tuccille goes on to point out that things like this are starting to happen in the United States too. California has a new law that can punish doctors who didn't toe the line on don't toe the line on COVID, or who do other things that are then branded as misinformation by establishment sources. And they also there's also talk about going after lawyers who do something similar. So Tuccille's basic point is that occupational licensing has always been a bad thing. Reason, of course, is writing about it forever. We know it's bad. It keeps more and more people out of professions they want to and lines of work that they want to pursue. But now it's taking like even another step. It's being used to regulate the speech of people who are in those occupations, and that they could, be stopped from participating in them if they say the wrong things. This is truly, truly appalling.
Great material. My first one, church proves the poor will benefit from privatized education. These are two of my favorite cathedrals. On the left, we have Salisbury Cathedral in England, raised through voluntary funds from priests many years ago. And I've never been there, but I have been on the right to St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City. So depending on which source you look at, there are hundreds of thousands of churches in the world. Almost all churches contain two things the Democrats, progressives consistently tell us are impossible if schooling were funded voluntarily instead of funded coercively through taxation. This is important because guys like Corey DeAngelis are leading the fight for vouchers, and through that discussion, the ultimate response from those who oppose is, well, what you guys really want to do, really in your heart of hearts, is privatize education, and that doesn't even need a follow-up. It's just so inherently bad. All you have to do is say that and then walk away. So the things that they contain that Democrats say are impossible are: one, the churches are private; two, they're funded voluntarily; most importantly, three, the poor can almost always attend for free; and four, there is competition and choice. There's not one big church monopoly that we're told will arise if the state doesn't constantly tell us who to associate with through religion. Sheldon, what do we have in Spiked Magazine? Spiked Online, rather, my mistake.
Magazine, which I've done in recent weeks. And there's an article there by an economist by the name of Patton. I can't find his first name. Why don't we ever hear the good news about climate? and I recommend people take a look at this. He points out that in recent years, and this continues a trend of about the last 100 years, deaths from climate events have fallen a good deal, and the economic cost of climate events has also diminished. And yet, this is at a time when every day we hear catastrophic predictions about how the Earth is going to burn up and dry out, and also be flooded at the same time. So it's going to be a very dry flood, but somehow all this is going to happen. And yet doesn't get coverage. All you get are anytime there's a heavy snowstorm or some drought or wildfire someplace, that's always considered, see, there you go, climate change. And of course, that's unfalsifiable, even though the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change itself says in the literature, it can find no clear evidence of any trends in these things, hurricanes and whatnot. So it's interesting that the point is that the media just not very interested in this stuff. This is David Patton. Not interested in it because they, along with the pro disaster scientists, have declared the debate over. They don't know why there needs to be any kind of debate. Isn't everything settled? And of course, that's not how science works. We know this, and Spike knows it. Science progresses through debate and dissent, and yet these people want to shut down dissent, just like we've seen them do it with COVID and so many other things. So there's good news out there. You may have to search for it. There's good climate news out there. You may have to search for it. Human activity may have some effect on temperatures. Nobody knows how much, but the point is, the Earth has been prosperous when it's warmer, and it does worse when it's colder. And there's been times in the past, long in the past, when the carbon dioxide was much higher concentration in the atmosphere than it is today. So sleep well at night. The climate is not coming to kill us.
Look at this horrible news for Al Gore. Climate-related deaths have decreased by as much as 97% over the last 100 years, data show from Spiked. Oh, sorry. He could have continued the scam. It was so close. There's a great book by Brian Kaplan titled The Myth of the Rational Voter, Why Democracies Choose Bad Policies. So you might think, well, why would people vote for something that's bad? Shouldn't they? It's their own government. Shouldn't they take the time to get informed? How is this not happening? How is it? Why are people uninformed? Kaplan has a very well thought out theory. He says, what voters don't know could fill a university library. In the last few decades, economists who study politics have thrown fuel on the fire by pointing out that, selfishly speaking, voters are not making a mistake. Kaplan goes on to say, one vote has so small a probability of affecting electoral outcomes that a realistic egoist pays no attention to politics. He chooses to be, in economic jargon, rationally ignorant. So you could spend thousands and thousands of hours researching agricultural subsidies, and you still, at the end of the day, get a 1 in 10 million vote that is allegedly counted. So the question is, well, then why don't people just give up? Why is it that people are so passionate about something that why can't they just say, oh, I'm not interested in politics, so I'm just going to plead ignorance on this? Robin Hanson and Kevin Simler put forth a theory in The Elephant in the Brain. I thought this was interesting. Political behavior is largely driven by coalition loyalty, wanting to appear loyal to the group around us. It's also in many ways a performance. Politics, like religion, is a team sport. Some treat expressive voting as an act of consumption, something we do in order to feel good, without concern for external benefits. In this view, voting is seen as providing a psychological reward, like getting to affirm one's identity or feel a sense of belonging. Benefits come not from voting per se, but rather all the activities surrounding the election, like attending rallies, posting to social media, and watching election coverage with friends and family. So it's important that when we are discussing things like libertarianism, we're not asking people to, hey, completely throw away your entire identity and replace it with ours. Yep, you've been wrong for 50 years. Just admit it. We can actually take something they already believe, thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not steal, and tell them to apply it consistently. You believe in equality? Well, if you're on the left and you believe in equality, you can't believe some people have the right to initiate violence and others do not have that right. You have to believe in equality. So that is what I thought were my main takeaways from these two quotes, all of which can be found for free at libertarianinstitute.org under the voluntarist handbook section. It's the final chapter, chapter 50 in the book. And those are like 200 of my favorite libertarian quotes. Sheldon, next one you have is The Fatal Conceit by F.A. Hayek, The Errors of Socialism. What'd you learn from this book?
Well, this is a 1988 book, so you might wonder, why am I reaching back? But I think these days, socialism, the word socialism has a cachet. Polls seem to show that younger people have a favorable attitude toward it. I guess this is maybe largely attributable to Bernie Sanders, who doesn't even know what he's talking about. He doesn't even know what socialism is. So Hayek, his final book, Hayek died, of course, and let's remember, he won the Nobel Prize in economics, and one of the great Austrian economists. His final book is called The Fatal Conceit, The Errors of Socialism. So that ought to get our attention, right? And what he wants to argue there, let me read a little bit of the beginning of it. This is maybe a bit much for just a couple of minutes of presentation, but I'm going to be writing about this. It'll be in my column, my TGIF column tomorrow, so people might want to take a look at it. But he begins the book by saying, this book argues that our civilization depends not only for its origin, but also for its preservation on what can be precisely described only as the extended order of human cooperation. He means, here, the market order. An order more commonly, if somewhat misleadingly, known as capitalism. To understand our civilization, one must appreciate that the extended order resulted not from human design or intention, but spontaneously. It arose from unintentionally conforming to certain traditional and largely moral practices, many of which men tend to dislike, whose significance they usually fail to understand, whose validity they cannot prove, and which have nonetheless fairly rapidly spread by means of an evolutionary selection, the comparative increase of population and wealth of those groups that happen to follow them. The unwitting, reluctant, even painful adoption of these practices kept these groups together, increased their access to valuable information of all sorts, and enabled them to be fruitful and multiply. Socialists, he adds, take a different view of these matters, which I claim is got to be the understatement of the millennium. Socialists take a different view. What divides socialists from libertarians, advocates of the extended market order, he calls it a conflict between, on the one hand, advocates of spontaneous extended human order created by a competitive market, and on the other hand, those who demand a deliberate arrangement of human interaction by central authority based on collective command over available resources. We didn't design no one designed the extended market order. It was kind of stumbled onto long ago. We're talking about long ago, more than 1,000 years ago, where tribes which had sort of acted as a unit, all pursuing the same end at the same time, for one reason or another, stumbled on a different way of doing things, which was to substitute general rules for this unitary action, and where people were able to pursue their own ends within those rules that we might say roughly correspond to the rules of just conduct, including respecting privacy and property. But the socialists never have even encountered this view, much less refuted it. Their view that we can, quote, rationally design a society in its detail is just ridiculous. It can't work. This builds on Mises' point about economic calculation being impossible without exchange. It's certainly a book worth looking at. It's readable, and you can get some sense of it in my article tomorrow.
Excellent stuff. My final one is Dave Smith was on the Dr. Drew show, and it was just nice to see, one of our friends on such a big platform and talking to, a guy who did Loveline, a guy who's very well known. And it was so interesting because Drew says, Michael Malice, he is an anarchist and I hate anarchy, but he talked about it and I was actually kind of intrigued. And I said, well, that actually makes a lot of sense. And just goes to show you that guys like Dave and Michael Malice are so vitally important. Here's the point that Dave makes. He makes one, but they talk about almost like mainly non political topics, but Dave talks about one thing. He does one plug for libertarianism and then goes back to being likable. He talks about what Larken Rose called the most dangerous superstition. And this is simply the idea that if government is us, we are the government, what makes government legitimate is consent of the governed. How is it that we, the population that don't have the right to go around issuing taxes, how did we delegate that right to government? If I don't have the right to go around and issue regulations with the threat of caging people, how did I delegate that right to, who would it be? I guess Mark Kelly and Kirsten Sinema. I don't have that right, but I delegated it to them. And then they delegated it to police officers who go around bragging about how they protect and serve me, even when I beg them not to. Here is how Larken Rose briefly summarizes his entire thesis of the most dangerous superstition. To quickly review, people cannot delegate rights they do not have, which makes it impossible for anyone to acquire the right to rule, aka authority. That is so vitally important because it simply gets at the root of what makes the state legit. It's like, well, monarchs are illegitimate. They never got any votes, but government's legitimate because it gets votes. Turns out that the free market is a much better indicator of what people want because it allows people to voluntarily disassociate with those who they don't see value in associating with. Sheldon Richman, thank you so much for your time, and thanks to everyone for watching the Odyssey channel and Libertarian Institute YouTube page. Take care, Sheldon.
You too.